And we're back. And we're back. How about that, eh? Start talking about Canada's crimes within its own borders, and we get blinked out. So we're just gonna wait a minute. We're just gonna wait a minute while people come back in. Very sus. Exactly, Misty. That's exactly what I said. I was like, oh yeah. So the minute we start talking about the illegitimacy, the invasion of First Nations land here in Canada, done by the Liberal Party, right? Which, as I always say, right? If they're willing to do it to them, they're willing to do it to us. Like it's this this sort of disgraceful, and what's so disgraceful about it is like the media is dead silent about it. Very much like the CRB cuts, very much about the abandonment of the populace, right? Yet the capitalist boogeymen are out to get us. Of course they are, DM. Of course, right? Like, no, if they're going to abandon us, like if they're going to abandon them, they're going to abandon us. Like it's very straightforward. It's very clear. And it's what we vote for. It's what we want. Yeah, odd timing. Yeah, that's what I said, Major. We must be doing some right. Yeah, there is that. No, that's oh Canada. That's you Americans. That's the Canadian national anthem, right there. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Except not really. Like, except not really, right? That's why we're a nation of losers. Like, we're not really standing on guard for Canada. Like, what are you talking about? We don't give a fuck about Canada. We don't care. Like, we don't give a fuck at all. We don't care even about our own children. Like, we don't give a fuck at all. We're literally just grinding ourselves into jobs until we fucking die. Yeah, CIA suppression, exactly. It's no, we're like it's embarrassing that we're going to like what's so annoying and the reason why I've been so depressed this last week is that I know that we are about to march into like an enormous clusterfuck. Like we're walking straight into it. And that there's people who are still going to be caught off guard by it, and there's going to be like big retrospectives done about it. Like, and people are going to be like, "Wow, what happened?" And meanwhile, the whole time I'm going to be sitting here being like, "This is what's fucking happening, guys. Like, this is what's fucking happening." I'm going to be saying it to people's faces, like, "This is what is happening." And then in 20 years, they'll be like, "Well, maybe that fellow was onto something." Like, fucking. Yeah, here in the U.S., we only hear the national anthem during sports events or military propaganda. Yeah, that's the way of it. That's the way of it. Yeah. World's richest man doesn't want to pay more taxes is right up there with toddler thinks bedtime unfair in terms of scoops. Elon Musk slams Biden over his new billionaire tax. And like the billionaire tax is going to be like what? Like 1%? It's like going to be so embarrassing. Didn't the stream get cut when you were looking at some... that was different because that was a straight up copyright claim, oddity. That was a copyright claim because Bill Gates doesn't want people to realize that he's just a grifter and a salesman trying to sell a solution to a problem that we don't need, right? That's what that all was and still is. And it looks like our governments are going to just continue the extraction process by going along with that obvious grift. And but that was a copyright claim. This was straight up my internet blinking out. I don't actually think that it was something. Like, I don't actually think it was like a CIA thing or anything like that. But like, it was pretty convenient timing. I'm just saying, pretty convenient timing. Stealing someone's labor is worse than stealing their property because it's theft of their life. You can replace property, but you can't replace hours of life. And rigging the system so people need to work longer hours in order to survive is this form of theft at a mass scale. Yeah, you never know. The billionaire tax was already axed the next day. Exactly. Just the nanobots speaking. Exactly. Good old-fashioned nanobots. So, if we want to talk about something serious... Canada leads G20 in financing fossil fuels, legs in renewable funding, report says. Canadian fossil fuel producers receive more public financial support than any in the developed world, according to a new analysis. And compared to subsidies for oil, gas, and coal, renewable energy gets less government help in Canada than in any other G20 country, says the latest figures from Oil Change International. They're very much going in the wrong direction, said Bronwyn Tucker, who helped prepare the report for the group, which has been tracking public finance of fossil fuels since 2012. This report, which includes 2019 and 20, adds up loans, loan guarantees, grants, share purchases, and insurance coverage provided to fossil fuel producers by government, government agencies, and government-owned multinational development banks. Around the world, that added up to almost $78 billion last year, down from the 2015-17 average of $111 billion. The report acknowledges that not all countries are equally transparent, with information from countries such as China and Saudi Arabia harder to come by. But it found Canada topped the subsidies list, providing an average of almost $14 billion a year between 2018 and 2020. Japan, Korea, and China came in close behind. No surprise, Tucker said. Canada has been consistently in the top four. They're always up there. At the same time, the report finds Canadian renewable energy received about $1 billion in public financial support, far less than other countries. On average, the report finds G20 countries provided about 2.5 times more support for fossil fuels than renewables. In Canada, the ratio is 14.5. That juxtaposition really stood out to me, said Julia Levin of Environmental Defense, which has received and endorsed the report. We have just spent so much on the sectors of the past rather than preparing for the future. Both the federal government and the Export Development Canada, the agency through which most of the financing flows, have pledged to reduce fossil fuel finance. During the recent campaign, the Liberals say they would eliminate fossil fuel subsidies by 2023. That's progress, said Levin, if you believe it, said John. This is the first time we've seen the government say, hey, we do have to do something about public financing. Export Development Canada says by 2023 it will reduce support to the 6 most carbon-intensive sectors by 40% below 2018 levels and set sustainable finance targets by July 2022. The organization will also be considering how to broaden targets to cover all sectors it supports, it says on its website. Levin says those promises are inadequate. They fall short of what needs to happen. Any climate policy that allows a public institution to continue giving support to the oil and gas sector isn't enough. Federal New Democratic leader Jagmeet Singh said the report shows the Liberal government isn't moving fast enough. It's never been clearer that this government needs to eliminate all fossil fuel subsidies, he said in a release. To beat this climate crisis, we need bold action to reduce emissions by 50% instead of the Liberals' less ambitious targets. So there's some orange liberalism for you. 40% is not good enough. 50% will do it. The oil change report comes as world leaders prepare to meet in Glasgow, Scotland, to discuss global progress on climate change and what needs to happen next. Public finance of oil, gas, and coal is expected to be on the agenda. The UK, Levin said, has already pledged to end such measures. They announced they'd be looking into it December 2020, and by March 2021, they had a policy in place. It doesn't have to take 10 years like it's been taking in Canada. Tucker said a coalition of 15 countries and institutions are expected in Glasgow to commit to ending public finance of fossil fuels. It is uncertain whether Canada will join, she said. This report by the Canadian Press was first published October 27th, 2021. I don't believe any of that shit. I don't believe any of that shit. Even a little. I don't believe these liberals give a fuck at all about the climate. I don't think they give a fuck at all about desubsidizing fossil fuels. I think that we are in a period of wealth extraction, period. And they don't give a fuck if they burn this place down. They don't care at all. They don't care at all. The only thing they care about is placating the public and trying to convince a gullible, stupid public to go back to sleep so that they can continue the process of extraction. That's all they care about. All they care about. Like 0% giving a fuck about getting off this fossil fuel thing. Like, if anything, the subsidies will go up. Like, I don't believe these liberals. I don't know why anyone would. Right? Like, it's embarrassing that people believe these liberals. Many people like me are turning to foraging as a supplemental source of nutrition. Yeah, plants and fungi can make a big dent in your food bill and can set you up when shit hits the fan. Yeah. Yeah, I've really been avoiding. I have to go grocery shopping, and I know I have to go grocery shopping, and I've really been avoiding doing it because, first of all, I hate interacting with capitalism, but also, like, I'm finally going to buy like the big 5-pound bags of rice, just because it's like it's getting too much. It's getting to be like, yeah, like there is going to be disruption. Like, we are going to have like, make sure you stock up on something like rice, something that stays for a long, long time. Yeah, if there's something that makes me angrier than petroleum companies, it's government subsidies of them. Yeah, of course. Like, it's the first thing that we should have done, right? Like, the first thing we should have done if we were serious about this was eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. Like, it's embarrassing that we're subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. Nationalize it. What are you talking about? So, like, they make the argument that, oh, the private sector will do things more efficiently. Yeah, absolutely, the private sector. But then you have to subsidize it? Nationalize it. What are you doing? Like, what are you fucking doing? It's obviously a grift. Like, it's obviously a grift. And the liberals don't give a fuck. Are you familiar with seed bombs and guerrilla gardening? Oh, yes. I have 25-gallon buckets ready to fill with sealed Mylar bags. Very nice. Trudeau plans on putting another carbon tax next April 1st, and with that, another 10% salary increase for all MPs and ministers. Yeah, of course. Like, it's just extraction at this point. It's just extraction. Oh, yeah. I'm in love with that video about crime pays but botany doesn't, where he gardens Oakland. Yeah, that's amazing. Rice, beans, instant potatoes, pasta, etc., etc. Yep. Gotta prepare for the apocalypse, guys. For some reason on Twitter, it's almost impossible to have these two realities both be true at the same time. The Republican Party is a dangerous white nationalist authoritarian party. The Dems have been turned into a mostly ineffective party by big corporate donors. Yeah, it's because everybody thinks that WWE wrestling is real, right? you got to take your side, right? You got to rah cheer for one or the other, and there's no middle ground. So, and if you acknowledge that this is the case, then they make fun of you to be like, oh, it's both sides, right? Both sides. It's like, yeah, it is both sides. Both sides work for the same party, which is the business party. Like, that's what's happening in America. Oh yeah, here's the Nanos ballot, right? So here's how people are polling. Conservatives polling at 30%, which tells you 30% of the populace is insane. Liberals also polling at about 30%, which tells you another 30% of the populace is basically insane. And then 23% for the NDP, which tells you about 23% of the populace is gullible. So no real significant change since the election happened. You can see how the liberals spiked. And of course the liberals spiked. They passed the CERB, right? They passed the CERB. And everybody went, oh, wow, an actual thing, right? An actual thing. And then a steady decline as people realized, oh, they're actually going to abandon us. Never mind. Anyway. Ugh. Yeah, indigenous leaders want independent criminal probes into residential schools. No shit. Like, no shit. Like, we know that the Trudeau administration is covering stuff up. Like, we know. And especially when you get this kind of thing. Residential school abuse reported to department while Jean Chrétien was minister. Right? Jean Chrétien made headlines recently by claiming that he didn't know anything about the abuse. Right? Literally, his department was receiving reports of residential school abuse while he was the minister. So either he's grossly incompetent or he's just a liar. Like, which we know he is. Like, we know. Like, he ran on a campaign of, I will eliminate the GST. Remember this? Right? I will eliminate the GST. Fucking didn't do that. He wasn't interested in that. It was a grift. It was always a grift. Right? Chrétien, at the end of it all, ends up working for corporate power, just like fucking Justin Trudeau does. Like, it's weird. It's weird that the liberals have any credibility in the populace whatsoever. Like, it's weird. Like, at least the conservatives are outright saying that they're fascists. Like just be fascists, man. Like, just go for the fascism. Like, if the last election showed us anything, by the way, it's that Aaron O'Toole's strategy of trying to get the party more to the left is a failure, right? That should be the Conservative Party's big takeaway. That we don't trust these conservatives. When they start faking and pretending like they're actually liberals, it doesn't mean anything to us. It doesn't swing us in their direction. If anything, I actually think the winning strategy for the conservatives is just go farther right, right? That seems to be what Canadians want, right? That seems to be what Canadians are actually interested in. And, like, maybe the next leader of the Conservative Party will actually be like, oh yeah, we could just go, like, super far to the right, like, straight up just embrace fascism. Canadians love that. Like, take a look at the rise of the PPC. Canadians love that. They want that, right? If I was in the Conservative Party, that's what I would be saying. If I was like, yeah, if we're actually genuinely interested in seizing power, if we actually genuinely want to do this, we can't pretend to be lefties. We can't, like, fake a move to the center the way that we did in the last election, right? Which was a complete failure. It didn't work at all. They didn't gain any power. They lost votes, right? O'Toole lost because PPC took away his votes. Yeah, it's more than that. It's more than that. Canadians don't trust the Conservatives. They don't trust the Conservatives. Especially when they come out and they're pretending like they're liberals, right? Like, we know they're not. Like, we know they're psychopaths. Like, we know. Otherwise, we'd have a Tory minority right now? I don't think so. I just don't think so. Like, I think that if it wasn't for the PPC, I think the people who would have voted PPC wouldn't have voted Conservative. They just wouldn't have voted, right? That there was a pretty significant decline in votes for Conservative. And it was because the Conservatives shifted to the left. And nobody on the left believes them, which is correct. Like, no one should believe the conservatives when they open their mouths and talk. Like, and so they should just embrace it. They should just shift to the right, scoop up the fascists. I think they'd actually do a lot better. I think that fascism is a very popular position in Canada. Hey, Mystic, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Yeah, I just think that the conservatives would be better off politically if they just embraced their fascism and said, for like, don't bother with the PPC. Like, we're gonna go super far hard right, and I bet you they would actually gain a lot of power. Canadians love fascism. Like, we love it. Yeah, and O'Toole flip-flopped on several issues. Well, because he was faking the whole time. It was obvious that he was faking, right? Like, it's so, like, all you have to do is go, like, from the election, all you had to do is go back, like, 6 months. And, like O'Toole was obviously faking and completely disingenuous. And it completely failed. So what they need to do is they need to elect, like, a genuine fascist. And then they'll do very well, because Canadians really love that. We love fascism. Like, obviously, like, our current party is literally funding Nazis. Like, we absolutely love fascists and fascism. We're really looking forward to it. Like, to me, that's why the conservatives don't gain power, because they're not actually doing what Canadians want, which is be fascists. Yep, fired staffer alleges sexual harassment, intoxication in suit against Alberta's premier office. No big surprise. Like, a gross supporter of the capitalist death cult is also a sexual harasser. Oh, big fucking surprise. I've never heard that before. The Kenney government is on its way out. Like, it's totally on its way out. Paul Vier's already said he's not going to run. He's already said that he's not going to run. I don't know. I feel like they're like somebody like Rona Ambrose. She could do it, right? It doesn't need to be a man. Like, there are plenty of examples of, like, take a look at Margaret Thatcher, right? Thatcher was very popular, and she was a fascist. Spotlight on the provinces. Concerns over healthcare, economy drive increasing dissatisfaction with governments. Like, no shit. Like, no shit. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we, percentage saying their province is doing a poor job. You mean selling people out to a capitalist death cult isn't popular? People don't like it? People don't like it when they're abandoned and you take money and give it to people who literally... Most right-wingers and left-wingers, except you, make me sick. Oh, I'm glad to be the exception, Mystic. What is it about left-wingers? Because I know what it is about right-wingers, but what is it about left-wingers that you find troublesome? I think I know what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear it from you. I'd like your perspective, because I know what I don't like about the left wing. Like, I have big problems with the Canadian populace generally, like, and the American populace too. But like, the Canadian populace is like, couldn't be more gullible. Like, if it was more gullible than this, we would be like in idiocracy. Like, we would be literally like, yeah, I can't, yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah, and that would be like a doctor. Denmark has announced any companies registered in tax havens will not be eligible for state aid programs during the pandemic. Oh. I wonder how true that is. I didn't actually look this up, but it is interesting. It makes sense. Like, you're not paying your taxes, you don't get state aid. Like, it seems pretty black and white to me. Like, the fall of the Green Party leader, Nanos Poll. What happened behind the scenes? I am more or less of the opinion that the corporate power structure is actively attempting to destroy the Green Party. I think that they're actively attempting to destroy the Green Party. Just the way that the fallout is happening, just the way everything is going, I am not going to be too surprised to see like a disillusionment of this party. Because you're getting stuff like they blatantly did not want to support a woman of color in the party. There's absolutely no way around it. Like these sorts of statements. Paul finished in 4th place in her Toronto's. Like, why are they running? Why are they running Anime Paul in Toronto Centre? Like, it's such a bad idea. Like, it's such a bad idea. That's Bill Morneau's former seat, where she placed 4th. Like, amid months of infighting and an internal party push to launch a non-confidence vote against her, the infighting was made public in June when former Green MP Jenna Atwin crossed the floor to join the Liberal Party. I mean, she wasn't really disguised as a neoliberal. Like, she is a neoliberal. But I really do think like what's happening now is an attempt to dismantle the Green Party completely, just eliminate it from public politics. Their intolerance, cancel culture, rudeness, man-hating, making fun of people's looks or sex life as an argument, yeah. I've noticed that. Like, what's his name? Nathan... There's a fellow who wrote an article against Jordan Peterson that Chomsky would often cite when Peterson was brought up. The Intellectual We Deserve is the name of the article. The Intellectual We Deserve. Published in Current Affairs. Nathan J. Robinson, right? And the only critique I've ever seen leftists give of Nathan J. Robinson is his appearance, right? Like, this is how he dresses. I don't know, kind of a sharp, dapper fellow, if you ask me. Why not? You know, if this is who you are and this is your internal self, off you go. And I've only ever heard a critique from the left based on his looks, right? Yeah, the toxic behavior, characteristics, personalities. Well, I mean, a lot of it is, a lot of it is just like here's a good example of what I experience, right? And why I don't really wade too deeply into trans issues. Because every single time I do, people come out of the weeds and just call me a transphobe, right? They just call me a transphobe. And I'm like, is this a way to actually have a conversation? Like, do you actually think that you're... And I say this to them. I'm like, do you think that this is actually building your case? Do you actually think that you're gaining allies? Do you actually think you're helping yourself? And when I start talking to them that way, they just disconnect. They just stop talking to me. Because they can't communicate on that level, like on a human-to-human level, right? All they've got is like, oh, here's a straight white man talking about trans issues. He must be a transphobe. And like it's like they're trying to drop a mic, like transphobe, and then they walk away like it mattered at all. And it's embarrassing. Like, it's just kind of embarrassing for them, you know? Like, I always walk away from those conversations just being like, man, what an embarrassment. And like, I'm not gonna ally myself with them. Like, that's really what it comes down to. It's like they're alienating their own allies with this sort of Socialist magazine Current Affairs fires staff for trying to organize workers' co-op regarding Nathan Robinson. There's a critique, not about his looks. There you go. Like, actually, like something tangible. And I feel like the same thing is like as Noam Chomsky is fading away, right? There is critiques coming towards him, but the critiques always seem to be that like he was always focused on America, and he doesn't really have big critiques about the Soviet Union and all of that kind of stuff. Not really. Like, he doesn't really write books about the Soviet Union or anything like that. Not in serious ways. Yeah, he is a bit of a dandy. He looks like Harry Anderson from Night Court. That's exactly right, actually. That's funny. What issue? Who cares? People that aren't hated and discriminated are happier and less likely to fall between the cracks. Yeah. And I think the thing about the left that drives me the craziest is that they don't have their eye on the prize. Like, they're not really interested. It's not really interested in like they'd rather be correct in their own kind of narrow view of the world than try to create unity. You know? Like that's my big critique of the left. And it makes it very easy to, hey Islam, how you doing? It makes it really easy to invade and dismantle. Like that's really what it is. And like, it's easy to get into leftists or organizations. I didn't actually say, hi Victini, how you doing? It's easy to send bad actors into leftist movements and mobilize them against one another. Like, it's really actually quite easy to do. Because people don't carry with them a spirit of forgiveness or a spirit of not even tolerance, but just like good faith. Like, as I was saying before, with the example of me talking about trans rights, right? Like, I talk about trans rights, and especially in regards to like Dave Chappelle and his whole thing and so on and so forth, which is an unfolding story and an interesting one. Yeah, it's why Canada has so many communist parties. Exactly, dude. Good to see you too. That like, and it's all along very silly lines, if you ask me, right? Like, oh, 100 years ago, Stalin and Trotsky had a falling out, and so we need to maintain that. I'm like, why? Like, why? Who cares? Yeah. Looks, well, I mean, I haven't actually looked into this, but here. This has become, oops. Oh, you come over here. The founder of Socialist magazine, Current Affairs, has reportedly effectively fired several staff members after they tried to organize a workers' co-op, former employees claimed in a letter. Several employees. Oh, yeah. That does sort of imply a level of disingenuousness, right? Yeah, that does. Well, and this is kind of what I'm talking about as well. Like, there is a my biggest critique of the left is that they're not actually mobilizing people to get into the streets. This is a critique I have even for someone like Chomsky, right? And for someone like this Nathan J. Robinson, right? Is they care more about their business than they care about the movement. That they're not actually galvanizing people to get into the streets, to surround the halls of power, right? And we're not actually. Yeah, there's nuance to it, of course. Nathan responded to this news, but there's three sides to every story, of course. Yeah, of course. And I don't really. Yeah, and there's too much infighting, and everyone has their own idea about how things should go, but like. At this stage in the game, to me, it's all petty. It's all petty. Like, it's just like, it comes down to moral purity. That's what it comes down to. That I have an idea as to what is morally right. And yeah, I don't like the use of dismissive names like FUD or Tanky. Yeah, I've gotten used to Tanky. I actually find Tanky to be kind of funny. Because it's like, you're trying to insult me by calling me a tank, like the sweetest thing ever. Like, I don't know. It's not an insult to me. You know, I understand that they're trying to insult me, but I don't like it. It just makes them look childish, right? That's where I've walked off on it, and I'm like, I don't consider it an insult at all. And there's an interesting concept of platformism as a means to unity. Well, I don't really buy into that either. Like, to me, like, the failing of the left is that everybody has their idea of what is or is not morally pure, right? And if you don't perfectly align with their idea of what is morally pure, then you must be corrupt, right? It's a type of fundamentalism, but because the left is so fractured in individual sort of ways, it's impossible for anyone to actually fall on the same lines. And like, the left doesn't seem to carry around a spirit of forgiveness. It doesn't seem to carry around a spirit of collaboration. It doesn't seem very possible to have disagreements, right? And I've really noticed, like, as a straight white male, like, if I try to get into leftist organizations and voice an opinion, I am told explicitly, let's hear from someone who's not a straight white male. Like, explicitly. So the left does everything it can to, and I get why it's doing it, because it is a safe space for, like, racial groups and like gay organizations and things like this, and it's a place where they are given voice. But I feel like while they are seizing power, they simultaneously alienate allies, right? And it's that alienation that is their largest failing, and why it's so difficult for them to actually organize in meaningful ways. And then I also think that the left, because it's full of, like, artistic people and people who have all these kind of, like, ideas about how things should go. Well, a lot of those ideas are bad, like, and they are bad. Like, they don't work. And a lot of those ideas, while they're creative and while they're interesting and while they're artistic, they don't work, right? Like, the power structure doesn't give a fuck if you do any of this shit. The power structure doesn't give a fuck if you, like, all dress in a similar outfit and, like, go and, like, do a big dance or something. It doesn't give a fuck at all. All you're doing is amusing it, right? Like, so my complaint about the left is that they don't seem to actually care about being effective, right? They just seem to want to vent most of the time. And they're just venting their, and if they get any pushback whatsoever, and it doesn't even need to be pushback, it just needs to be like asking kind of questions or trying to participate in a conversation, having a debate of any sort, right? And suddenly you're a transphobe or a racist or any of this kind of stuff, right? Because they're not actually interested in building unity, right? They're interested in being an artist or having a business, right? Has anyone read Chomsky's critique of the left at the end of Understanding Power? It's an interview about manufactured consent as he slams the left, and it's still current 25 years later. And it's everything you're talking about, John. I don't know if I've ever actually read it, but it's definitely something I've probably picked up. Because I've read a lot of Chomsky. Like, I've read a lot of Chomsky. And I get why people are going after Chomsky now, like, as he's getting into the end of his life. And it's typical, especially in capitalist society, to tear down idols and all this. Like, that's pretty normal. But, like, it's... I don't think that the critiques that are coming towards Chomsky are particularly genuine. I think that you can critique him accurately on his unwillingness to call out the Democratic-Republican alliance. I think that that's something that you can critique Chomsky for, especially in his older life. Like, his support for Biden was unconscionable, right? Him pretending like a Biden administration was going to be different than the Trump administration, like, it was a joke to me. Like, it did actually discredit him in a lot of ways. It really, really, like, opened him up. But that doesn't mean that his work on American Empire is invalid, right? It doesn't mean that he hasn't done a lot of good work, right? It just means that he's a human being who has human perspectives and human positions. And his response to me would be, well, what's the alternative, right? Vote Trump or don't vote, right? But my response to that would be organize to surround the halls of power. And he would say, well, okay, that's great to do, but what do you do in the interim? And I would say, in the interim, you organize to surround the halls of power. Like, stop engaging in the theater. Like, take the theater over, like reveal it to be theater. And your participation in a theatrical in a theatrical system only enforces the theater. So just don't. Let's see what you guys have been saying. I got a question. Is it possible to live in a capitalist society, but with higher minimum wage, free healthcare, and free college all at the same time? For a minute, maybe. Like for a minute. And the only way that you will ever gain any of those things in a capitalist society is through heavy mobilization of the people. Surround the halls of power. That's what happened in the 40s, right? The communists and the socialists, they surrounded the halls of power. They got a lot of concessions. That's what happened in the 60s during the free love movement, the hippies and the civil rights movement and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, surrounding the halls of power is literally the only way things happen in America, period, without exception. There's no time in American history where suddenly there's been big benefits passed for the workers and all this kind of stuff out of the goodness of their hearts. It's not how it works. So you can gain a higher minimum wage, free healthcare, and free college by surrounding the halls of power with millions of people. And that'll stay that way for a little while. But the capitalist system is structured and designed to claw those things back, right? And they eventually will, unless you surround the halls of power, right? You're seeing why this system is ineffective. Like, you're seeing why this system doesn't actually work. Because the only way anything actually happens for the benefit of the people who are involved in the system is if they threaten its disillusionment through revolution. And then the only way that the capitalists maintain their position is through concession. And FDR's New Deal was massive concessions. There were massive concessions that happened during the New Deal, most of which that have been clawed back now. And that's how the capitalist system works, because it's an antagonistic system. It eats itself. So while it is technically possible to get a higher minimum wage, free healthcare, free college, all that kind of stuff, it won't last because the capitalists don't want it to. Like, why would they want you to have free college when they could plunge you into debt peonage? That's what they want, right? They want slaves and serfs. That's what they want. So, and it is an inevitability that either, and the capitalist system dissolves itself one way or the other. It either dissolves itself because of a workers' revolution that finally gets rid of the capitalist system, or it dissolves itself because the capitalists no longer need it. And they just begin to rule as the oligarchs that they are. Right? And that's the only thing that can happen in capitalism. There's no such thing as a sustainable capitalist model. It doesn't exist. It simply doesn't exist. Everyone has their own idea how things should go. Meanwhile, the majority of these people look at a country like China, who's actually having amazing success, and says, no, not like that. Yeah. It's always funny when like white neo-colonial settlers who like are the beneficiaries of massive genocide think their opinion of countries that are actually doing like revolutionary projects matters at all, right? That's why I don't really critique China very much, right? Because they're like to critique China is to be like the ultimate armchair quarterback, right? They're so much farther along than we are. They're so much more advanced than we are. Like, they're so much they've done so much more work than we have. The only reason to look at China is to learn from it. That's the only reason. And attempting to critique it, especially in this society that is in free fall collapse, that is going to abandon millions of people into the streets, like, it's childish to do. Like, and to me, that's my big critique of the left generally. It's a very childish sort of a movement. Like, there's a lot of petulance in it, a lot of like foot stomping, and if I don't get my way, then I'm not going to participate kind of thinking. Like, it's very childish, and the critiques of China are really indicative of that, because they're always very uninformed and very childish, and very rooted in, well, we do it this way, so obviously the Chinese must be doing it this way. And it's like, that's really seriously not how it works. Like, in serious ways, that's not how it works. And because of this decontextualization from like what the Chinese are actually doing. So like, it's like the people who say that that Xi Jinping is a dictator, right? He's a dictator when it's obviously not the case. It's just that the Chinese democracy is not our democracy. It's not Westminster, democracy. It's a different democratic structure. It's a different type of system. And so because it's a different type of democracy, well, it's illegitimate. It's not the same as our democracy, and so it's not democracy. So he's a dictator. And you're just like, you sound like a baby. Like, you sound like a baby. When, like, literally, like, I say this to people all the time. I don't even argue with people anymore about it. I get them to the National People's Congress, like, literally show them the Wikipedia page. This is the structure of China's government. You don't even need to read the whole thing. You can literally just look at this picture. There's 2,980 seats, right? Most of those seats are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The next largest bloc are independents, right? And then from this organization, other structures are erected. And they are erected and controlled by the National People's Congress, right? So you've got like the political government groups, right? But those groups are voted on, and it's just how Xi Jinping got to power, right? That they elected him from within this structure. It's a democracy, and clearly a more effective democracy than ours. So, and like, there are parties. Look, there's parties. Like, you are fooling yourself if you think that China is not a democracy. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are just fooling themselves. Yeah, and to build on what Islam is saying here, that capitalism only exists through violence. It began by enslaving its own citizens, throwing them into factories and onto boats, including children, and then enslaving the black population of Africa in order to build up the New World, while simultaneously committing a genocide against the First Nations people, right? That if capitalism were to suddenly not have slavery or genocide in it, it would cease to be capitalism. Those things are a requirement. Yeah, these minute disagreements won't matter when we're all dead due to climate change, exactly. Well, and also the left doesn't, like, because there's so many wounded people in the left, they don't really get that, like, how do you come to an agreement? Well, you have to have a conversation about it, right? And that the point of the discussion is to connect with one another and create an agreement, right? But they don't view it that way. They view it as an attack, right? You're attacking me, right? And part of that is honest, because I think that people who are wounded and who have been attacked tend to take that kind of posturing and position. It's difficult to work with. The left is fractured into these niche groups that reject anything that doesn't fit into their Venn bubble exactly. I get that ideological side. I try to focus on doing things and those who are doing things that are making things better and ignore labels. Yeah, that really is the case, that like it is about doing things, right? Like, if you're not actually doing stuff, if you're not actually going out and doing stuff, then I don't really consider you a leftist then, honestly. Like, if you're not going to protests, if you're not actually doing things in the world, if all you're going to do is do like this camera stuff and talk to people this way, like, I don't really consider you a leftist. I kind of consider you a liberal, mainly. Like, you have to go out in the world and you have to do stuff. What is the communist stance on homeschooling? I don't think that, I don't know if I've ever seen like an outright communist stance on homeschooling. Yeah. I I don't know if I've ever run across anybody who's ever actually written anything on it. I don't know. Homeschooling. Off you go. I don't really care one way or the other, honestly. I mean, the education system is an indoctrination system in the first place. Like, it exists explicitly to vet out the rebellious versus the obedient. That's the purpose of the education system. It doesn't really exist to educate. Like, sure, reading, writing, math, very important. But after you teach reading, writing, math, so like grade 6, basically, everything from like grade 6 onward exists explicitly to just be like, oh, you're listening to what I say. When I tell you to do something, you do it, right? So you are a good student. You get good grades. You are not doing what I'm telling you to do. You are rebellious. You have your own ideas and your own attitudes and your own thoughts about how things should go. So you get bad grades and off you go, right? And then that just kind of continues, right? The bad kids go this way, the good kids go this way, or the rebellious kids go this way, or the independent kids go this way, and the obedient kids go this way. And they get the good grades. They continue going on being obedient kids until finally the obedient kids get the good jobs and then get abandoned by the capitalist system because they can't even afford houses anymore. So, considering that model, I mean, I don't really, like, you want to homeschool your kid instead? Sure. People are looking at different piles of capitalism crap and saying, we need to clean this up, and there's just so much to do. It only seems like infighting when it's prioritizing issues, disagreement. Yeah. Oh, I lost the thread. I lost the thread. You guys have been chatting away. Islam. Please. We don't need that here, okay, bud? Like, I want people to feel like, and Mystic is a regular who comes in all the time with questions, who is on his own journey. We're not, we may not see eye to eye on things, but he's always been very respectful, and so I would like the people in the chat to be respectful to him, okay? And that's the type of community that I'm trying to build here. I don't think that we should mock people for, unless they are assholes to us. And Mystic has never been an asshole to me, and he's certainly not being an asshole to you. So let's move forward with kindness, okay? Yeah, for a lot of people, leftism is an accessory. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, actually. That's the problem with anarchists versus socialists. Well, and anarchists can end up aligning with the right wing, I find. That anarchists, like, they don't really, and I don't want to say this of all anarchists, obviously, but, like, they're hard to pin down. And the kind of the anarchist ideas and the ideas that come out of anarchy are very wobbly and difficult to maintain. Wait, what? Chomsky isn't anarchist enough? Well, most anarchists ends up bowing to power because of defeatism, right? Or their inability to organize. If the current system affords you zero power, why even try? Yeah, anarchism is just in vogue because it's an easy way for liberals to signal radical views while not doing any work. That's a good way of putting it, Victini. That's a real strong way of putting it. But I think I agree with you. I strongly doubt protest mobilization will bring fundamental change today. Both times it worked, New Deal, civil rights, but there was an alternative to capitalism in the Russian Revolution. Could be wrong, though. I mean, I would argue that what's happening in China is an alternative to capitalism, right? Like, what we're seeing in China is 100% an alternative. Certainly to the imperial model that we've been living under, right? Like, it's just whether or not we're willing to act. Like, why do you think they're demonizing China so hard? Like, they're so, like, they have to. Because if people start to actually realize that the Chinese model is a superior model that's actually working for its own citizens, people will start demanding it. And so they've got to do everything they can to demonize it and lie about it. They're uncommitted and not willing to strike or murder or risk their socioeconomic position, but want to appear radical, yeah? Andrew Yang proposed UBI, but as most socialists were against him, had me confused. I mean, I think that honestly, Mystic, I got to be straight with you on when it comes to American politics. There's a lot of it's mainly just theater, right? It's mainly just theatrics. That like the reason why someone like Andrew Yang is trying to push forward on a UBI is not because he believes in a UBI. It's because he believes it will get him elected. Like everything in America, every political position, without exception, without a doubt, is a vanity project for the person who wants to be elected. They just want to be elected. They're not actually that interested in enacting legislation or helping people. They just want the prestige and the power of the position that will afford them. There are examples of people who like Dennis Kucinich, for example, is someone who I do think actually wants to enact change. But you can take a look at his career and see how ineffective he's been, right? So it doesn't matter. Like, and there aren't really socialists in America. So when you say like Andrew Yang proposed UBI, but most socialists were against him, I don't know who you're talking about. Like I don't know who these socialists are that you're talking about. And you're going to find as you talk to me, Mystic, that like my opinions of this extend to people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. That they're just playing characters. That American politics is more akin to the WWE than an actual political system. That like Bernie Sanders is just playing the character of the socialist, right? But at the end of the day, he goes behind the curtain with his villains, the Republicans or whoever. And they all shake hands. They all get paid by the same people. Protest mobilization does work because liberals are terrified of losing power and public demonstration covered by media threatens their power. Exactly. That's exactly how it works. That underneath all of it, the unspoken truth is that we could just do away with this system. And if you have 1 million people, and especially if you have 1 million people with the support of the populace, right? Because they poll the populace. And if the populace is in favor of that 1 million people surrounding the halls of power, like how much longer until those 1 million people just form their own consensus, create their own constitution, right? And then just march into the halls of power and say, this is the new constitution. You're illegitimate. And if the people are like, that's right, then that's the end of it. And that's the unspoken truth and the unspoken reality of how this could go and how it can go. And don't bullshit yourself. If that happens, the UN will acknowledge you. Like, the UN has written documentation that if that occurs, if there is a peaceful protest of like 1 million people surrounding the halls of power with the support of the people, and they write a new constitution, and then they march into the halls of power and they say, this is ours now, and the populace says, we agree with that, then that's it. It's over. And it can happen. And it has happened. So they're terrified. They're terrified of peaceful protest. It's the one thing they can't do anything about. Right? If you start shooting, they know what to do about that. And they're very effective at it. But if you surround the halls of power peacefully and you refuse to participate in the capitalist death cult model, and you garner the support of the populace, and then you drop a new constitution, and you say, this is the document we care about now, your document is illegitimate, they can't do anything about it. Like, they can't do anything about it. Which is why when it starts to happen, capitalists begin to capitulate power. Which is what happened with FDR, right? And under FDR, like, they capitulated everything except the means of production. It was the only thing they refused to give over, which was the mistake of the communists and the socialists then, that they shouldn't have allowed the wealthy to maintain the means of production. They should have killed the beast then. And all of the problems that we're facing today can be traced back to that maybe there's an alternative universe somewhere where the socialists and the communists refused to let up and seized the means of production from the capitalist class, refused to be chased away, and they actually killed the beast. Because that's how you do it. You seize the means of production from the capitalist death cult. You have a lot of frustration there. Something in particular has you so worked up? UBI is a band-aid solution. The world's on fire. UBI won't. I disagree that UBI won't fix anything, but I agree with you that UBI is something of a band-aid solution, right? That it's not an end game. It's just another thing. It is a reform, which is why I don't really go all in on a UBI, but I do support it because if someone's got a cut, they need a Band-Aid, right? And sure, they still need treatment, and sure, they still need like actual care and all of that. But you know, if you're bleeding out, you need a Band-Aid, and it's not the final thing to do. In fact, I view it as the first thing to do, because if you pass a basic income, it can solve a lot of problems very easily and very quickly. But then you need to move forward into things like rent control, seizing the means of production, right? Nationalizing stuff, nationalizing the fossil fuel industry, for example. But it's one of many. And the reason why I think socialists and communists are opposed to a basic income is because they see it as a way for liberals to maintain their power, and that's not inaccurate. That a liberal government, in order to maintain their power, may very well pass something like a basic income. And then a gullible and sleepy populace will just be like, oh, problem solved, right? And continue to vote for their own destruction. But if AOC proposed UBI, you'd be for it, right? I mean, I don't really view AOC as a special sort of person. Like she's very well branded, right? Her branding as the socialist is very strong. But she's just another American politician. Her character is just the socialist, right? Like that's it. Like you've got to start viewing all of these politicians as like wrestling characters, because that's what they're doing. That's what they're all doing. All of them. No exceptions. No exceptions. All of them are just erecting edifices and public images and like the squad, right? Like that's super WWE wrestling. Yeah, we're the squad. Here I am, AOC, right? I'm here to bring forward truth and justice into the future. We're going to fight against the establishment Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, and we're going to bring forward universal health care because we're the squad. That's it. Like, I don't believe her. At this point, I don't even know if having a UBI would help. I'd much rather throw the... Yeah, I get you, Islam. I feel you on that, dude, for sure. Like, why have money even? Like, money's not real. Like, why have it? Billionaire-controlled narrative control is a critical issue. Protests can break the spell, if only for a moment. Yeah, well, and what protests can really do is they can take the theater over, right? They can take the theatrics over. And once a protest movement takes the theater over, it's very, very difficult for the billionaire class to get it back, right? It's very difficult to get it back. And usually they can only get it back after an act of violence. Like what happened with the Occupy movement, right? That they like had to clear the encampments, like systematically clear out the encampments through using police force. And that was the only way that they could actually take control of the theater narrative. No, that's literally me, an anarchist that isn't willing to do that work. Now I'm a socialist. Yeah. It does help poor people a lot. Wise socialists would be against that. They're against it because it doesn't go far enough. That it's a piecemeal reform. That's the reason they're against it. Because they would rather the system be replaced than reformed. Because the system can't really be reformed. And they understand that liberals can just use it as a piecemeal reform in order to maintain the capitalist system. I'm a bit softer on something like a basic income because I do think it would help people. Yeah, dictatorship of the proletariat, for sure. Yeah. Let's just be kind to each other. Let's just be kind to each other. So it can get very spicy very quickly, and we shouldn't allow it to get that way. I wish I was homeschooled. Yeah, it has its own pitfalls. China outlawed relying exclusively on private tutors for education recently, of course. Public school can suck, especially as a neurodivergent, so homeschooling can be a great option for many, yeah. Do you know of Hakim? Yeah. He has some interesting critiques on UBI from the left, yeah. I know about Hakim, and his critiques are the critiques, right? Like they're fairly well established at this point. And somebody like Richard Wolff, for example, like Wolff's critique of a basic income is that it's reformism and that the capitalist class will just do stuff in order to eliminate any benefits of it. And don't get me wrong, like the critiques of the UBI are like they're not wrong. I'll put it that way. Like they're not wrong, but they're not 100% honest that like a basic income would absolutely help people. Like the CERB helped people, right? Like it's undeniable. You can't look at me and tell me that the CERB did not help people, right? And sure, maybe they'll chew it away, or sure, maybe it'll like claw away, or sure, maybe it'll be used as like a political lever for other politicians to use against the populace and so on and so forth. And like all of that is true. Like it is true. But it would also help people, right? So while we are moving forward as a movement, a revolutionary movement, in order to ultimately overthrow the system and seize the halls of power and seize the means of production, as we are moving forward in that, if in an effort to avoid what I consider to be the inevitability of this movement, if they want to throw money at us, I say we let them. And then continue and take over the halls of power and take the means of production anyway. Homeschooling is not right or wrong. We're ideological in communism. Yeah, the education of the person is paramount, not the system that achieves it. Yeah. I'm an introvert. I don't like people. Can't stand them. That's why I wish I was homeschooled. I'm an introvert too, bud. I'm an introvert too. Oh yeah, good. My mom used to teach us. She would make us hold each other's hands, and I would say, "You're my sister, and I love you. Please forgive me." And then my sister would say, "You're my brother, and I love you. Please forgive me." And the process of doing it was so fucking lame. It was so goddamn lame and so annoying that that all of the anger and the angst that we had towards each other would just diffuse because it was so fucking dumb. Like I'd like to say like we came together in genuine love and kinship and camaraderie and I love you, right? That's never how it happened. It was always just like, oh my fucking God, I cannot fucking believe that I'm standing here fucking holding my sister's hand. You're my sister and I love you, please forgive me. And then she would go, you're my brother and I love you, please forgive me. And then we would hug and then we'd both look at our mom and our mom would be like, good. It was just so fucking stupid and lame. But as I've moved forward into adulthood, I've come to see, like, we should all do that. We should all do that. Everybody should do that. Anytime there's any kind of conflict or any kind of thing, we should have, like, this moment where we grab each other's hands and we say, you're my comrade and I love you. Please forgive me. And it doesn't matter if you think it's lame and it doesn't matter if it's stupid because that's the point. It's so fucking stupid that you can't be mad. You mentioned breaking the spell for a moment through protest. Would it not be better to find a way to cast a new spell? There must be an alternative to the prevailing narrative as a life preserver when the spell breaks. Yeah, Mystic, I was a loner in school, even in university. I enjoy finishing my degree online. Yeah, I'm jealous. I wish I did my university online. Glad to be here and vent my frustration and obvious. Gonna have a shot of Brandy Alexander drink. Call it a night. Have a good night, DM. Don't drink too much. UBI isn't socialism. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, it is a reformist system. It is just like Anyway. All right, guys. Looks like we're all having a nice chat here. Protest mobilization. We just had the biggest protest movement in Black Lives Matter. Now we can't even get a human infrastructure package passed. Exactly. But that's because the Black Lives Matter movement got diffused because of COVID, right? They weren't able to actually move forward and do what has to be done, which is to surround the halls of power. Like, that's why this infrastructure package isn't getting passed, because the halls of power are not surrounded. Like, if Biden was trying to push through that bill and there was 1 million people outside the White House, it would be a different story. It would be. So the solution is to surround the halls of power. The education system at all levels is designed for neurotypicals. It's hard to fit in, yeah. Yeah, you just got your $1,000 UBI. Also, your rent just went up to $12,000. Yeah, of course. Night Misty. All right, guys. We're well over. We're well over. Always remember, guys. Each and every one of you is a divine or quantum being, if you prefer, living in this quantum energy. Don't let these guys gaslight you into thinking anything else. Good luck. We're going to need it.